I'm going to do something here that's a little bit out of the ordinary for me. I'm actually going to read off my notes a little bit as I go through this. The one thing that John Detmers had asked me when he asked me to do this, he said, just do what you think. And so it's not always the safest thing to tell me to do whatever I think. That's what I'm going to do. So here we go. First thing I want to do is remind people, I've been around doing this for a long time. I started in '81 when the Joint Strategic Plan was being implemented. And what a lot of people don't know and recognize is that Randy Eschroeder is really the father of technical committees in the Great Lakes Basin. That was Randy's primary responsibility when he first started, was to get the technical committees going, keep them focused, keep them focused, keep them focused. And he did a wonderful job at that. And Randy, I just want to say thanks for everything you did. The work that you did ultimately paid off. The technical committees are pretty functional these days, a large part because of what you did. And I say thanks to him. He still calls me kid. I've been at this since 1981. I'm going to be 60, and I'm still a kid in Randy's eyes. Well, Randy's the father of Great Lakes Technical Committees. The primary role of the technical committees essentially is to act as a research and assessment branch of the lake committees. At least that's what my view of this is. What I've listed here are what I see as the primary responsibilities of the technical committees, and that is to serve the lake committees. Our jobs are to advise on management, to evaluate fish community objectives, assess their relativeness or ability of us to achieve them, develop research questions that help us work towards understanding community dynamics and helping us achieve fish community objectives, and to conduct research and monitor fish populations. All of these, which each of the technical committees does to a pretty well degree, I think. A little bit, terms of reference. I don't have terms of reference for the Lake Erie and Lake Ontario technical committees, but what I've got basically, what I've shown here, the terms of references for the Upper Lakes technical committees. They define membership. Basically, membership sort of defined on a number of agencies on the lake. Whether on Lake Huron, because there were basically only 2 agencies for a long time, they identified more members to be there. They defined what the chairmanship is and who it could be. Find resource peoples, agency commitments, consensus as the way to move forward, and define sort of frequency of meetings. As I stated earlier, one of the primary roles of the technical committees is to produce written and oral state of the lake reports. And Mike and my slides are going to overlap here. We didn't talk about it, but we're going to show the same sorts of things. The Joint Strategic Plan tells the lake committees to produce state of lake reports, and the lake committees then tell the technical committees to evaluate how well we're doing in achieving fish community objectives. And it falls on the technical committees to produce both oral and written reports, which we try to do as best we can on a 5-year rotation. This is the same thing Mike showed, only I put it in a table format. Hopefully it's easier for fishery biologists to understand it when it's in a table format. But I'm going to stress the same things Mike did. Lake Superior Technical Committee has probably been the most successful. They produced the most state of the lake reports. They got the process rolling earlier. Lake Erie Technical Committee has produced the least state of the lake reports, but I understand that why after Mike's talk. Fish community objectives were produced very late in the ball game, and so there really was no need to produce state of the lake reports. Having said that, I'd also say that if you haven't been to Lake Erie committee meetings and been to the technical committees, it's really the working groups on Lake Erie that really do all the work. The working groups, there are person working groups, there are habitat groups, lake trout groups, cold water groups. They do all the work and produce great reports every year. So it's not like they're not doing their job. It's just that they really weren't required to produce written state of lake reports as often as the rest of us. One of the things that the technical committees do on a regular basis is to develop research priorities. That is, from our perspective, what research needs to be done on the fishes and their habitats in each of the lakes to help us understand the dynamics in the communities so we can evaluate our ability to achieve or not achieve fish community objectives. So I've sort of went through and taken out what I view as sort of the idealized sort of research priorities each of the lakes have. Each of the lakes have specific ones, but they all fall into the general categories that I've shown here. And as Mike stated, the lake trout rehabilitation plans and lake trout management plans that were developed across the basin were really where the technical committee started. This is where Randy really focused all of us in the technical committee. In the technical committees, we started out as lake trout technical groups, and as rightly so, we've evolved tremendously since then. Each of the lakes developed the primary lake trout rehabilitation plans in the mid-early 80s, which meant that they started the process in the late 70s and early 1980s. It's an easy, a 4 to 5 year process from the time someone tells you you need to do this until you produce a written report. Technical committees, lake committees, nothing moves fast. We only meet twice a year, we exchange emails, we talk, but the process is slow. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It means that we actually get some time to criticize each other, think about what each other's saying, and then produce something that we hope works in the long run. One of the things that the technical committees are doing more these days, and we really got the cart before the horse, is we developed lake trout rehabilitation plans, but we didn't think about maybe we might want to rehabilitate forage before we rehabilitate the adult predators that we want to be part of that. So each of the 4 lower lakes, at some degree or another, is developing strategies for promoting recovery of the prey base, particularly ciscos in one form or another. Lake Huron, we've developed what's called a Cisco Rehabilitation Guide. Lake Michigan, the technical committee has developed a working group to establish a native planktivores working group, and they're developed a white paper to tell the lake committee and how we go about rehabilitating prey species. Certainly in Lake Ontario, we've had an ongoing program to try and reintroduce ciscos or deepwater ciscos in that lake for over a decade now. And in Lake Erie, I'm not really sure what the status is, but every one of the lakes right now has some discussions within the technical committees about ways to promote recovery of native prey fishes. It's going to be a difficult process. The picture I have on the right is when we were trying to collect ciscos for the Lake Ontario program on a whitefish base. They spawn in the wintertime. They spawn when it's cold, they spawn when it's nasty, and so that makes our jobs a lot more difficult. So our ability to promote recovery of native species, particularly through introduction and gamete collection programs, is going to be difficult just because of the time period when they spawn and our ability to go out there and sample them. So what I wanted to do now was sort of go through the research projects. Oops, excuse me. Is that working? Oh yeah, right. So each of the committees has ongoing research projects. They all have a priority for what they want to do, and they've all done a huge amount of work over the last couple decades. Regardless of whether you're talking about food web studies, or you're talking about estimating walleye and yellow perch harvest limits, you're talking about surveying juvenile fish or understanding lake trout survival in each of the Great Lakes, all the technical committees are embarking and doing a much better job at monitoring status populations than I think we ever have before. You got to remember, when I started in '81, the technical committee meetings were my boss, like I'll give you a good example, Lake Michigan, my boss Bill Eager and Merle Keller from the state of Michigan sitting on opposite sides of the table telling each other to screw off. That's how lake trout management plans and technical committees worked at the time. We still tell each other to screw off, but we're friendly about it, and we do a much better job of it now. Every technical committee is wrestling with what I define as the 800-pound gorilla, and that is there are dynamics going on in the systems that we still don't understand very well. You've got the whole invasive species alewife, salmonid die-offs, that die-off of Chinook salmon in Lake Michigan in the late 1980s really scared everybody. There's not a lake committee member here who doesn't worry about that as another consequence of that happening again. As such, it really structures the way lake committees work and the project that the technical committees are involved in. On the other hand, large changes in productivity that have occurred in the Great Lakes Basin and continue to change on a regular basis are affecting our ability to survey populations. It affects catchability, it affects gear selectivity. So it really makes our job difficult at trying to assess what exactly are the moving targets that we're supposed to be understanding. Lastly, I think one of the challenges of the technical committees are the political rhetoric going around these days that governments have to be smaller. People have to be more free to not have governments intrusive on them, and I think that general argument is wrong. What people want is a government that works for them, not against them. And so the shrinking budgets in each of the jurisdictions, the travel restrictions, silly. Can I say silly enough? Travel restrictions that take place. Politicians think that technical committee members do the same things that they do, but it's not technical committee members that go out and exceed budgets and getting thrown in jail and and have all kinds of other problems. It's not us. It's the politicians, and they're reflecting their views down on us for the most part. One point I wanted to make with this graphic is that what makes the technical committee's jobs difficult is everything is a moving target. This graphic is whitefish and lake trout harvest out of MH1 in northern Lake Huron from 1929 to the present. There is no equilibrium here. Equilibrium is non-equilibrium. Everything is constantly changing. Regardless of what the stressors that we look at, it's always in a state of flux, and it always will be. And that's always going to make all of our jobs much easier, much more difficult through time. One of the things that also makes technical committees' jobs difficult is the constant changing of individuals within those technical committees. Let's see if this works. This was the Lake Superior Technical Committee in 2007. This is the Lake Superior Technical Committee now. It's basically me, Tom Pratt, Mike Steves, that are actually still members on the technical committee. So one of the things that makes technical committees function well is continuity, consistency in memberships, having people there who remember stuff so you don't beat a dead horse too often, which is what technical committees tend to do. What I believe is that stable membership is one of the keys to effective technical committees. I made a list of sort of challenges that I think, 10 challenges that technical committees have that will always have. It doesn't matter whether they're started in 1979 or they're going to exist in 2030. First one is wear your biological hat. It's the most difficult part each of us have. Each of us come with an agency bias and individual bias, and to leave those behind is the hardest thing that technical committees do. But the technical committees that function the best are the ones that learn to leave their biological hats on and leave their agency hats behind. You know, we're still not very good at understanding interactions between habitat and fish populations, except when there is no habitat. I remember saw a paper one time on crappies in North Dakota. The guy did a big fancy analysis, and the bottom line was crappies need water. Because when there wasn't any water in the river, there wasn't any crappies. So we understand habitat to that level, but that's about it. We also don't understand the effects of invasive species on indigenous species, something we're going to need to do and continue to need to do. People still argue in this room about the effects of invasive species. There's no clear bullets anywhere really on any of them. You know, and zebra mussels and quagga mussels are a prime example. You know, like I said before, one of the things I think real challenges is the changing water quality in the Great Lakes Basin, first because of agency management to actually clean the system up, and then because of the arrival of dracaenads, makes our job much more difficult in understanding catchability and population dynamics. It's not impossible, it just makes it more difficult, something we're going to have to continue to do. Lastly, remember the dynamics are occurring in a constantly changing world. There is no real equilibrium. Equilibrium occurs over a time period about that big. Everything's in non-equilibrium. So I also have some recommendations for technical committees, and particularly lake committees. Don't rotate chairmanship. I think some of the lake committees now have chairmanships for technical committees that rotate on a 2 or 4 year basis. I don't think this is a good idea at all. I think that a chairmanship that lasts provides a continuity that the technical committees need to move forward, and that rotating chairmanships are not good. You know, once a chairmanship's position is up, everybody in the technical committee looks at each other and you're like, it's not my turn, it's not my turn. We don't want that. If somebody steps up to volunteer to be technical committee chairman, let him stay there until he dies. You know, lake committees need to keep their distance. For the most part, this works pretty well, but I'll give you an example of when it did. It was a Chinook salmon die-off in Lake Michigan in the 1980s that really destroyed what I thought was a very good Lake Michigan technical committee. Once the politicians and the fish chiefs and the sports groups all stepped in, the technical committee in Lake Michigan, in my opinion, its ability to do a good job was eroded. It's making a recovery, but I think that particular instance is a prime example of when the lake committees and managers step in, the technical committees become ineffective. One of the things that I found was that when we actually separated the technical committees into the technical committee, that it made it easier. You know, most technical committees, everybody sits in a group around a set of tables, and so the technical committee sort of dissolves into the darkness. You don't know who's a technical committee member and who isn't. So what we did at Lake Superior is we took the group and we moved them to the front, just like at Lake Committee members. That's a technical committee. I think that worked and has been a great function. Lastly, I know that the lake committees can't do much about this, but these silly travel restrictions have got to change. They're just, you know, it costs more for a fish manager in the state of Michigan to travel to Lansing from the Western UP than it does to travel from Lansing to Port Huron, Ontario to attend a meeting, but yet most of the Michigan guys have to stay on the U.S. side during that meeting. One of the things that I wanted to stress here was that Bo's, I don't know if Jim's out there, but I couldn't believe it when I saw this picture of Jim's eyes. I said, this one's going in there. You know, I've been at these meetings for 34 years now as a technical committee member, and I know that one of the things that really works well is when people go out and do extramural activities like this. This really strengthens bonds between people, and people who have bonds between them function much better in technical committees when there are adverse conditions, people with different philosophies and ideas and ways to go. This sort of stuff makes a huge difference. In the Lakes Huron Technical Committee, we do this on a regular basis. Lastly, I'm going to stress this again. I think that the Red Solo Cup has done more to help foster good working relationships in the Great Lakes Basin than just about anything else. And I'm not using this to promote drinking as a way to and socialize as a way to help technical meetings, but what it does is people who play bowling together, people who play golf, people who play baseball, people who go fishing, people who drink together, whatever it is at socials, they develop bonds to make a huge difference when it comes to being effective in an environment where there are lots of people with lots of different ideas and lots of different backgrounds. And so, if we really want effective technical committees, this sort of stuff is one of them. And the technical committees that work together are the technical committees that actually go in saunas naked with each other. So that's it.